Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about the newest release, Aube, and this character looks pretty insane. She's releasing on July 23rd through a limited summon. She's a 5-star Ice Ranger. She has high health and defense. Her imprint concentration increases effectiveness. And without further ado, let's get straight into everything you need to expect about said character. Now, to start things off, yes, this character's animations and design look pretty insane, truthfully. However, what is pretty notable about her kit is that even before we directly get into it, her kit will focus on AoE control, her combat readiness, manipulation, her ability to protect herself, and help another ally move after her. And with her base speed, she can be used either in Cleave as the opener, as a follow-up in said Cleave after another opener, or you can use her as a technically slow but still turn 2 sort of anti-opener, or as a way to prevent or deal with other openers, speed units in general. Now, that said, the main parts of her kit are again the new Immobilized debuff, which we'll get into in a moment, the permanent concealment buff, and her artifact. But let's actually start by breaking down her kit, beginning with her skill 2. Now, our skill 2 is listed as Film Fiesta. Now, this has a 100% chance to grant Cascade to all allies, and it also grants Skill Nullifier once and an extra turn to the caster. This feels pretty reminiscent of the other water sort of buffers in the game, like Amid. You'd be right. This is another character who does feel a bit more aggressive or a bit more helpy towards cleaving or eliminating an enemy team, but you'll see later how this isn't just necessarily a cleave character, as there are some synergies that you should keep in mind. Now, this, of course, is a non-attack skill, so it'll artifact, or rather, activate her artifact, which we'll get into in a moment, but this does also seem to be an artifact or a situation where you'd be able to use something like normal Flan's Unseen Observer for the extra souls, which could also be very helpful. Now, as we move to the skill 3, this is called Eternal Moment. Now, this is a pretty OP skill, I've got to be honest. Now, first and foremost, this dispels 2 buffs from all allies, and there is a 100% chance to inflict Immobilize for 2 turns and Restrict for 2 turns too. Now, this is pretty noteworthy for a couple reasons, as again, this is a full strip, guaranteed to strip, apply to debuffs ability at the same time, but of course this does cost 20 soul burn, or rather 20 souls for the soul burn, and the soul burn is an ignore ER effect. Now, let's actually break down the buffs here, though, or the debuffs / buffs, as this is pretty impactful. Now, Immobilize is basically Requiem Ruana's S2 turned into a debuff. With it, a target affected by Immobilize can't receive the combat readiness increase normally provided by its speed stat, and this literally means that it will stop units from moving. Now, again, to be clear, this is not you cannot receive a push or something. This is you can't even move. Like, the normal progression of the combat readiness bar does not happen when this debuff is on you. Now, to add to this, the restrict that's also applied on this prevents other characters that would otherwise receive a push through something like a passive or a any sort of push up. Like if you take a turn, you cut ahead. All of this is removed as soon as Aube basically presses S3, as again, this is not only an Immobilized debuff, which prevents you from naturally pushing, it also stops you as well because you have Restrict at the exact same time. Now, these two together literally means that you cannot move, which is insane and pretty goofy as a concept. But next, we actually should talk about concealment, as this is another pretty impactful and, well, something that we've seen a couple times already, especially with the other soul, or rather, I should say, summer limited art or limited character, in the form of Famir. Now, after using S3, Aube also gains concealment, and this remains active throughout the battle, and effectively it means basically that you have Spectre Tenebria's passive, and so long as another ally is present, enemies can't activate, or rather use Aube as the target of a skill, and that or rather I should say in general, this makes it pretty difficult to remove her after she takes her turn. Though again, this does, to me at least, suggest that you'll still likely need to ban some of the faster characters. Though again, cleave character, lots of cleavers will end up pre-banning or banning or dealing with Zeo in some way, but this is a pretty insane kit already. Now, in terms of the skill 1, this is honestly not nearly as impactful as the rest, but it is a 20% CR pushback with her S1, but It's okay. I don't think this is necessarily going to be something that people fixate on much, but as you are getting into the later stages of a game, being able to push back by 20%, especially if you start lapping characters, is actually quite impactful, though nothing to write home about, of course. Now let's actually break down her artifact, because this is another really super almost OP feeling artifact. As again, it feels like epicseven at the moment is starting to kind of cycle through artifacts and give certain effects, but not just for rangers, but also for warriors and for knights and the equivalent of so, as we've seen with the soul providing artifacts at the start of battle. Now, this is a similar sort of feeling where now we have an artifact that grants swift attack for the rangers. I believe you're also able to see or receive this from Coley's artifact, or the 5-star Coley's artifact as well. But of course, this is a bit different now, as you are given swift attack, but also granted speed for the ally with the highest attack. Now, this is also pretty insane, and this is actually something that you can artifact, or rather activate, once every 3 turns, which is pretty nice. Now, Aube will naturally activate this through her skill 2, and with it, her skill 2 will activate the artifact, grant an extra turn, and then use skill 3. And with all of this, honestly, the cascade, the extra turn, all the additional damage effects or helping effects that you provide to the team, this is a pretty cleave or very aggressive sort of character combination, which I'm a pretty big fan of already, to be honest. Now, in terms of cleave use, Aube is likely going to be used in 2 different ways. You know, she's again likely going to be used how they show her in the showcase, which is as a bit of an opener. You're going to use her skill 2, grant cascade, be a pretty big threat, especially against characters that deal with or have some sort of you can't hit me effect, like the Freerin. You'll activate her artifact again, grant the extra turn, and then use her skill 3 to strip and control the entire enemy team. Now, the second option that you could play with her, or you could use with her, is to play her after another opener. And though we didn't necessarily see that here, of course, you can have another character take a turn, like a New Moon Luna, or, I mean, even the Famir, who has now shown herself to be a bit of a decent opener option. But of course, you could, just use her, as you're seeing on screen now, as a sort of pairing for the new Elvira, and you can give her a bit of debuffs or a bit of setup here, as again, the former Famir character that Elvira character that we talked about does also need debuffs in order to push up and gain or activate the rest of her kit effectively. That said, again, just from what you're seeing here, they aren't pressing or taking any turns whatsoever, so this effectively guarantees at least the turn for everyone on your team up to 4 times. It is also worth mentioning again that though they are frozen in place, the debuff does dispel eventually. It's not like they're stuck there and they can't take turns until they die. That would be absolutely ridiculous. But as you can see here, you are at least allowed to take effectively 1 turn from everyone, and then after this has effectively been cleansed, or after enough time is taken, you'll see it explodes. Now they are naturally progressing through their turns. Now, I did actually want to talk a bit about the build expectations for her, as again, her build will definitely focus more on speed, effectiveness, HP, and defense. She definitely doesn't seem to need damage dealing subsets by whatever means. And again, if you use her as the opener, you'll of course want her to have as much speed as possible. Otherwise, though, if you're using her after another opener, you could definitely give her a bit more bulk or F. How much you'll need is really dependent on how comfortable you are with tagging certain characters. Even the characters that you're seeing on screen right now may not necessarily be dedicated entirely to ER, but I've seen a lot of Bibluses that have tons of ER and are using some sort of cheese sort of build, or some sort of setup that will allow you to deal with or one-shot, or rather I should say prevent one-shots on your team if there aren't any defense breaks. But again, the defensive stats, though nice, aren't necessarily the most important thing in the world, as again, you are concealed and you can't be attacked, though this may be an issue if you are, of course, dealing with AoE characters. I'm looking at you, Freeman, of course. Now, in terms of strengths, I do want to point out, of course, again, this is an AoE strip character before applying debuffs that has immobilize and restrict together, which is pretty crazy if we're just being honest. But to add to this, of course, the soul burn allows you to ignore ER and strip and guaranteed apply set debuffs to the team. Of course, the S2 also provides Cascade, skill 2 gives Nullifier, the S2 is an extra turn, and there's permanent concealment after S3. So she kind of has a lot of utility already. She's not very difficult to kind of keep alive, and kind of as you'll see through here, she does feel similar to the other character here, New Moon Luna, where she isn't very easy to kill, while also having a very impactful debuffing kit. Now, her artifact is also pretty crazy, again, as you'll have this to kind of synergize, not just with herself, but also for other characters. This artifact does seem to be pretty insane for Ashemancer Elena, as again, you do have the, well, you know, the speed or the speed buff, the swift attack, and the 3-turn cooldown is definitely not nearly as big of a deal, especially when you consider that Elena herself, when she's trying to activate this, also does have a similar sort of tuning or pacing for this. But of course, we do also have to talk about some weaknesses and things to test. The main value here, or the main thing to test here, being whether her value is entirely based on whether she lands control. This might sound pretty unusual, but this is something that we kind of saw with Albeid Ludwig, who, despite not necessarily applying or activating his S3 every time, was still able to be pretty strong just by applying, of course, the 20,000 fixed damage with his S1, depending on, you know, of course, like what sets and what sort of setup you have. But to add to this, we also should consider whether this character is going to be pretty effective without the soul burn. So whether or not you're going to be able to, again, invest highly into effectiveness here, or if you're going to have to switch up into HP or bulk, or some sort of combination of this, kind of like what people do, again, with the New Moon Luna or the Sea Phantom Politises of the world. And of course, whether or not she can be controlled before moving, and if you are going to try and play her as turn 2. These are a couple things that I think we still need to look out for or consider as weaknesses, but I do also think that we should consider the cleanse and debuff protection, if this is going to be as relevant after the initial strip, and whether or not her actual value will depend entirely or exclusively on Immobilize, or if Cascade... Oh, excuse me, that was my alarm. Or if Cascade is also going to be pretty impactful, which I figure it is going to be, and is part of the reason why I think, despite most cleave characters seeming kind of weak right now, if all you provide is attack and crit damage buff, this is a character who does seem pretty strong, as this does also allow you to apply Cascade to, well, a character like Frieren, and she instantly gets one-shot too. Now, as for my initial impressions on her usage, she's obviously a PvP control character who seems more designed for cleave than slower teams. She does also function, again, in a lot of ways, which I think adds to her flexibility. And off the rip, the Immobilize basically being Requiem Mirana's passive applied is just insane. But otherwise, again, having concealment makes her crazy safe, I would say, or criminally safe, kind of, again, similar to Spectre Tenebria, which, again, isn't really something that I feel like you'd see from, or that you'd expect from a character like this necessarily, as, you know, she already provides a skill nullifier, but she also can't be targeted. In any case, it is what it is. Her artifact being pretty nice too, I think, is going to be a pretty big selling point for her as well. And as her role is to control the team, it feels like she's going to do that quite well. Though, again, I do suspect that, especially with characters like Nodos, you are still going to have to find or draft another way to deal with him, as, again, it's not like you prevent revive through some way, shape, or form. That's going to be it for today's video, though, guys. Thanks again for watching. I think Aube looks pretty insane. I'll see you all next time. Stay safe, stay healthy. Good night.